What's up, True Crime World? You're here with Luminol on the Wall, and I'm Bevy.
And I'm Becky. Last week, we discussed the case of Sylvia Likens, who suffered immense abuse at the hand of Gertrude Baniszewski. Today, we will talk about the continued abuse Sylvia endures that ultimately leads to her death. The topics we cover include sexual and physical abuse. This is part 2 of the Sylvia Likens case. Listener's discretion is advised. So Bev, last week where we left off was Sylvia was just being punished by Gertrude, and she was forced to use an empty Coca-Cola bottle and insert it into her vagina.
Yeah.
This was done in front of Gertrude and her children, and then she was sent back to the basement.
Yes.
So, do you remember last week when apparently Sylvia had created a rumor about Gertrude's 2 daughters being
a
prostitutes?
prostitute? Yes. And then she said it was true, even though court casings later on revealed she did, in fact, not say that.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. I remember.
Well, this rumor comes back to haunt her. Because at one point, Gertrude brings Sylvia back up to the kitchen and said to her, "You've branded my daughters, and now I'm going to brand you." And she began to carve the words, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it," into Sylvia's stomach with a heated needle.
Oh my Lord.
Just terrible, right?
I have nothing to say. There's no words
Girl,
that I
speechless.
have. Like, what the hell?
I know, you can't even imagine someone doing that to anyone else.
She's like, you branded my children as prostitutes, so
I'm
literally going to scar you for life with "I am a prostitute" on my body. This girl is 16.
Yeah.
Not to mention how fucking painful that would be.
Oh my God, right? Now, as we know, Gertrude, she's a frail woman.
Yeah,
And
I was upset. She's weak. She's got asthma.
She's got asthma. Well, Bev, before she was finished writing everything, she actually became
faint.
Well, too weak to go on.
Ew, that pisses me off.
Well, in a shocking turn of events, she actually gets one of the neighborhood children. His name is Richard Hobbs. She persuades him to finish etching those words into her stomach. Then Richard gets Gertrude's 10-year-old daughter Shirley to help him bring Sylvia back into the basement, where the two actually decided that they were going to use an anchor bolt and attempt to brand Sylvia again. But instead of using a needle and scraping it into her, they were literally going to brand her like how a cow or a horse would be.
Oh my God. No, they are not.
Yes, they are.
How? So they have one of those poles with like the image at the very end of it stick like...
Yeah, they kind of have to makeshift it. And now they wanted to makeshift an S. I'm not really sure why they landed on S, but that's what they were going to do.
Maybe for Sylvia. Or honestly, my initial instinct was like slut or something based on the whole "I am a prostitute"
It does
thing.
make sense. And you know where they placed it? Her left breast.
Oh my gosh.
However, instead of it being an S, the 2 kids just kind of messed up and they attached one of the parts backwards. So it ended up being the number 3. So now at this point, like, it just means nothing. They just branded her.
Well, you know what the saddest thing is about it? That it's even a 3. I know it's a mistake and they were going for an S, but the fact that it was 3, did you not think of like the concentration camps with the Nazis?
What?
And they were all given a branded number or like a tattoo of a number.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know why my mind thought to that, but it's just like, I know it wasn't meant to be a 3, so it's not really making sense. But with everything that's happened to her and all the abuse she's suffering, it's just like my mind immediately went there, you know?
Mm-hmm. I get it. Like, same as in kind of the concentration camps. They weren't actually, like, physically, yes, they're humans, but to the people running it, they were just a number. They didn't really care about them. Just how Gertrude and all these people seem to not give 2 flying farts about Sylvia. Like, how can they do that to another human?
How can they not care?
Right? Interesting point there, Bevy. So Bev, when Gertrude saw the final product, because remember, she didn't do it herself, but when she saw the final product, she made fun of Sylvia and taunted her and told her that she would never be able to marry because of what was carved into her. She also brought a bunch of other neighborhood children to come see her and see that she was branded.
Oh,
and then
God.
She continued to tell all these kids that happened to her at a sex party.
Just making up lies about her.
Yeah. And just trying to degrade her, make her seem like she was
what she's telling her that she is, what she's branding her to be.
Yeah.
You're a prostitute. You partake in naughty, nasty things. And everyone shall know about it, dearie.
Which is just terrible.
This is like the most shocking case of abuse I've heard so far. And actually, I think in my life. And it's really hard to swallow and to accept as like something that really happened. It's hard to even believe that people like Gertrude exist.
It is hard to believe. I kill a fly and I'm like, oh.
I do not let Craig kill spiders.
Yeah.
Not in my presence.
That's right.
I just feel too bad.
Be like, save the animals. Save the world.
Insects.
That's right.
Every living thing.
Every creature is part of our ecosystem.
Actually, I don't let him kill the spiders because of James and the Giant Peach. You know, the spiders had a life. They did.
That's
and
your
they
reasoning?
lived peacefully.
Mm-hmm. They do.
You know? And then they all
They
flew
have
a fucking
families?
giant peach in the sky.
So look what happens when everyone works together.
Yeah, don't kill spiders.
Or Sylvia.
And don't fucking abuse young children, young women,
Exactly.
and treat them like they're nothing. Like, fuck. I just wonder if a lot of this has to do with, like, the point you made earlier about her being so beautiful and them being, like, jealous. And then, you know, Gertrude's in a vulnerable state in the sense that, like, her love life is in the shitter.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wonder if that has something to do with, like, the way she's and why she's abusing her in that way, you know, like picking on her for being a slut and all this. Like, I just wonder if it has something to do with that, but
Maybe she projected.
yeah, like I just will never know the answer, but I fucking wonder.
It leaves you with a lot of wonders because no sane person does this.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So later that night, Sylvia came to the realization that she's probably not going to live through this. And she told her sister, I know you don't want me to die, but I'm going to die. I can tell. At that point, Bev, Gertrude knew just how bad off Sylvia was. She was getting pretty close to death. So she made Sylvia write a letter that would mislead her parents to think that she had run away due to the extreme abuse and mutilation from the local boys because she had apparently agreed to have sex with them.
Oh my, I feel outraged yet again, Rebecca.
Yes, you
the
do.
Fuck. So, okay, one, Gertrude is going to protect herself in all of this. Two, she's still carrying on the fucking fabricated story of Sylvia being this, like, slut, even in her messages.
Yeah.
To her parents. I hate this woman. I just hate her. I hate her.
I hate her too. She's a bad lady. Now, Gertrude's plan was to have Sylvia write this letter and then have her son, John Jr., and Jenny blindfold Sylvia and take her to a nearby wooded area, and it was called Jimmy's Forest, and leave her there to die.
Just leave her.
Just leave her. Let her succumb to her injuries, more starvation, malnutrition. Just let her die. Now, Sylvia actually overheard Gertrude and John making these plans, and she knew she had to get out. So on October 25th, she attempted to escape from the basement. She did not want to be left for dead. Unfortunately, she had become so weak and had so many injuries that Gertrude caught her when she was trying to leave the front door.
Oh no.
I know. That's like how bad off she was. Like Gertrude,
The frail, weak-ass bitch, abuser, caught up to her.
exactly. Could you imagine that? I have dreams where I'm like trying to get away, but I'm so weak, or I can't run fast, I can't scream, and I'm trying to get away from something bad. And you feel so helpless. And I know it's just a dream, but imagine that in real life. It would be just terrifying. Watching this old, slow lady like You can't leave.
You can't leave. I will get you.
I will catch you, even though I'm slow as shit and weak.
Yes. Terrifying.
Now, because of this, Gertrude decided she was going to punish Sylvia. Because
that's like her fucking
that's what she does.
Sylvia does nothing. She punishes her. Sylvia continues to do literally nothing. She punishes her.
Exactly. So what she did, this is kind of a weird one, but she forced Sylvia to eat crackers. But because she was so dehydrated,
it would have just been like fluff and like...
she couldn't eat them.
It's like if you take a thing of cinnamon, right? The cinnamon challenge.
It's so dry and
just like...
both crackers.
Yeah, we know
exactly. But she forced her to eat them anyways. Once she was done, she proceeded to beat her with curtain rods until they were completely bent into 90-degree angles. Coy Hubbard, another boy in the neighborhood, was there at the time, and he also decided that he too wanted to hit Sylvia, and one last time he hit her and she became unconscious. They dragged her back down to the basement. That same night, Sylvia made one more attempt to draw attention and hopefully escape. She screamed, banged on the walls with hopes that one of the neighbors would hear her and save her. Shockingly though, Bev, a neighbor did hear her cries for help. They thought it sounded like it was coming from the basement around 3 a.m. However, past that, they didn't hear anything. So they decided to not call the police and report it.
Oh, God.
It was like someone heard it, but again, didn't do anything. I could imagine, though, if you did hear screams from a basement, they're probably pretty muffled. You probably have no idea necessarily that someone's like...
And if they stopped, you'd be like, what did I just hear? That was weird. Was that screams?
Yeah, was someone maybe having a party?
What was that?
Yeah, like there's so many options. So I can see why they didn't. It's just so sad that they heard it without knowing and then obviously didn't do anything about it.
Yeah, and it's just like right on par for this case, right?
Yeah.
People are notified. They try and do something, or they at least follow through with like claims of abuse, like the nurse at the school, right? She did go to the house. She did check up on her. But yet again, people believed Gertrude, or it fell through, or like they were convinced otherwise. You know what I mean? It's just like every single time, like the sister tries to come to see her and Gertrude sends her away. It's like, it's just one thing after the other that just doesn't ever amount to Sylvia being saved from this shitty freaking household.
Exactly. It's devastating. Now, by the morning of October 26, just hours after she attempted to escape, Sylvia was so unwell that she couldn't even speak intelligibly. She wasn't able to control any movement of her limbs. So at that point, I think Gertrude kind of panicked and attempted to feed her a donut and a glass of milk, but then became enraged when Sylvia physically could not even move the milk to her mouth because she was so weak. They brought her back to the basement, and it wasn't long before Sylvia became completely delirious, constantly moaning, mumbling. And just to add to the humiliation, Paula had asked her to recite the alphabet. Sylvia was unable to get past the first 4 letters. By then, Sylvia had defecated, and Gertrude was forcing her to clean it herself. So while Sylvia is attempting to clean up her poop, and herself for that matter, Gertrude had invited neighborhood kids over who had tormented her just to watch her.
Watch her suffer.
Suffer her final hours, I guess. Now, witnesses to Sylvia's final hours had made mention that with her final bit of strength, she was actually able to name the people who had caused her pain. And she pointed at Gertrude and Richard, naming them both. At that point, Gertrude had given her a rotten pear, and she was so weak that she couldn't even bite into it. And she stated she could feel her teeth loose. Her sister Jenny attempted to console her sister. And she said, "Don't you remember, Sylvia? Your front tooth was knocked out when you were 7. Then Jenny was forced to leave her sister in the basement and go perform gardening chores for the neighbors to earn some money.
Wow.
So that last moment, couple hours she could have spent with her sister, she was denied.
Was taken away from her.
Exactly, to go make money nonetheless. Ironically, for the neighbors of some of the kids, that had helped abuse her sister. And ultimately cause her death. So
I would be wondering if I was Jenny, if I would be the next victim.
I would be worried too. Like, are my parents going to get me in time? Like, what's going to happen? I would just do anything that Gertrude told me to because I would be so fearful.
100%.
So by this point, we know Sylvia couldn't even clean herself, so she was completely soiled and just so dirty. And John Jr. decided at that point he was going to give Sylvia a bath with the hose. Once she was cleaned, she actually made one final desperate attempt to get out of the basement. At that point, though, she's just way too weak and injured. She was so close to death, she couldn't even reach the stairs.
Oh, God.
Gertrude knew that she was trying to escape, and because of that, she stomped on Sylvia's head before just standing and staring at her. Now, shortly after 5:30 p.m., Richard Hobbs came over to the Baniszewski's residence and went directly to the basement. He himself had actually fallen down the basement stairs, and when he landed, what he saw was Stephanie crying and cuddling Sylvia's decrepit body. She was holding her, and she was only down there because Gertrude demanded that she go clean Sylvia's body now that she's dead or close to death.
And that's her daughter.
That's
Stephanie
her daughter,
is
yeah.
her daughter.
Yeah.
And she's crying.
And she's crying. She's like the one child of Gertrude, besides the babies, that actually has some compassion for Sylvia.
Yeah, of course. She was the one that
kind of stood up for her.
When she stole the gym clothes or whatever, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Stephanie and Richard actually decide to give Sylvia a warm, soapy bath. Then they dressed her in new clothes and laid her upon a mattress in one of the bedrooms upstairs. At that point, Sylvia whispered her final wish. Daddy was here.
Oh, no.
Stephanie then turned to her younger sister, Shirley, and said, she'll be all right. However, when Stephanie realized that Sylvia was not breathing, she actually attempted to apply mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Now, Gertrude, being the disgusting woman she is, yelled at the children that she was just faking her death. Then proceeded to beat Sylvia's lifeless body with a book, screaming, "Faker, faker!" Sylvia was only 16 at the time of her death and had only been in custody of Gertrude for 2.5 months.
Wow.
Now, when Gertrude finally realized that Sylvia was not faking it, she instructed Richard Hobbs to call the police from a nearby payphone. The police then arrived around 6:30 p.m., and Gertrude had led the officers to Sylvia's body. When the officers got there, you can imagine how horrible of a scene it was. She was extensively bludgeoned, her body was mutilated, the mattress was soiled, and then Gertrude had the balls to hand the officers the letter that she forced Sylvia to write. She told the police that she had been taking care of her, trying to get her better for at least an hour before she died. She then told them she applied rubbing alcohol to the wounds and attempted first aid before she passed. Then she proceeded to tell the officers that Sylvia had run away from home with several teenage boys before returning to the house earlier that afternoon, bare-breasted and clutching this note. Gertrude had also forced Jenny to give a very rehearsed statement of the events leading to her sister's death. However, Jenny, being the amazing sister she is, saw her opportunity and whispered to the officers, "If you get me out of here, I'll tell you everything." Jenny's official statement left the officers no choice but to arrest Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, and John Jr. They were all immediately suspects of Sylvia's murder.
I find that so devastating for Gertrude's children. I know that they kind of partook in the abuse, but I do feel that they were kind of forced to, or at least manipulated to do that by Gertrude. You know, they're young kids. I don't really know that they would have done that without their mom kind of egging them on. And now they're all being arrested. Like, that is traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
And they've witnessed a young girl's death. And I just think that's a travesty. And then literally what happened to Sylvia is mind-blowing. Like, it's fucked.
I know. Could you imagine the cops walking in and seeing her body? Like, there was 2.5 months of abuse shown on her body. And for Gertrude to give them that story, that this all just happened this afternoon.
I couldn't fucking stand that. Like, when you were telling me, I was just like, I couldn't even gather up the words in that moment to even respond. Because you're just like,
did this actually freaking happen?
How the fuck did
real?
she really think this was just gonna fly with the police after seeing what they saw? Like, they're gonna know the piss, the poo, everything that you're seeing on that mattress is like more than a day old.
Yeah. And that people don't do that on their own accord usually?
Yeah. Silly.
Well, Bev, within a couple hours of the police being called, on that very same day, Coy Hubbard, Richard Hobbs were also arrested. Those are the two of the boys that from the neighborhood that we heard about the most,
Right,
partaking in this abuse.
Gertrude out here just ruining fucking lives.
All the children's lives, left, right, and center for
Her own children,
completely different reasons.
the neighborhood children.
Right?
It's like literally all of them. She ruined their fucking lives, man.
Yeah, and some of these people are going to go to jail. And imagine the kids that witnessed it, didn't partake, didn't tell anyone. Imagine what, like, their psyches are like as they get older.
Oh, yeah. They would probably have
Some major
some
trauma.
trauma from that scenario.
I know. I can't even watch an animal be hurt on YouTube. Never mind see something way more drastic in real life. I'd be fucking scarred for life.
Yeah.
Now, Bev, all 6 suspects were all held without bail until the trial.
Good.
Right?
Yes.
Now, in classic Gertrude fashion, when she was initially questioned by the police, she actually denied all involvement in Sylvia's death and torture.
She would do that.
She would. Gertrude said that on October 22nd, that she had known that the kids, meaning her daughter Paula and Coy Hubbard, had physically and emotionally abused Sylvia. She told officers Paula did most of the damage and Coy Hubbard also beat her a lot.
Wait a second. She is throwing her children under a semi-truck?
The biggest of semi-trucks,
She's throwing them under the semi?
Yes, Bev.
Holy shit. I mean, it makes sense for, like, who she is.
Yeah, like, why would she admit that?
But, like, holy shit. Her children.
Yep. What she did confess to is that she told officers that she forced Sylvia to sleep in the basement, but only on 3 different occasions when she had wet the bed.
Bullshit, Gertrude. Bullshitty shit. Bullshit, Gertrude.
Yeah, Bev's calling bullshit.
Bullshit.
Well, when the officers asked about Sylvia's incontinence and her mental and physical damages, Gertrude became a little more withdrawn from that conversation and tried to steer clear of all of those questions.
Well, I mean, what the fuck what can she say?
Absolutely nothing if she wasn't involved.
Yeah, she's going to have no reasonable explanation as to how all those things occurred within Sylvia without implicating herself.
Mm-hmm. Well, Paula, on the other hand, as we know, was a huge contributor to Sylvia's death. And without a single shred of remorse, she admitted in a statement that she had repeatedly beaten Sylvia with her mother's police belt, broken her own wrist on Sylvia's jaw, pushed her down the stairs 2 or 3 times, giving her black eyes. Then John Jr. admitted to spanking Sylvia on one occasion and said that most of the other times that he had used his fists. He burnt her with matches multiple times, and he told officers that his mother had burned Sylvia over and over and over again with cigarettes. So they're starting to see a more clear picture of Gertrude's involvement from her kids. Throughout the rest of their investigation, they also realized that there were so many people that contributed to Sylvia's demise. Specifically, there were 5 other children from the neighborhood that would stop by and abuse Sylvia quite regularly. So along with Gertrude and her children, those 5 other kids were also arrested. And on October 29th, they were all charged with causing injury to a person. However, all these kids were released to their parents, but they had all been subpoenaed as witnesses for the upcoming trial. So they didn't actually have any persecution.
And while I think that is kind of sad, I do truly think that the prosecution would probably be wanting to actually get Gertrude for the crime.
Oh, for sure.
She's the adult. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the largest sense of it, it is her fault. Sylvia was under her care And she invited these kids into her home to partake. So I don't know that those kids would have had the opportunity to see that abuse or to inflict that type of abuse on a human being if not for Gertrude. So
Oh, I 100% agree.
as sad as it is that nothing really, they don't face consequences, these kids, I also am kind of like, yeah, like, bury that bitch.
Exactly. Like, let's use these kids as evidence because we're going to put her away forever.
Yep.
Now, before the trial, the full extent of Sylvia's injuries were not known. So, during the autopsy, the detectives found out that she had suffered more than 150 separate wounds across her entire body. They were not all done at one time, and they were all at different stages of healing.
Right. So you know she has the history. Like, this started, it's not just that night.
Yeah. It's not just that one night with the boys, so Gertrude's story is completely, they're able to throw it out the window.
Yeah. You're a lying sack of shit.
Exactly.
And also, just as a quick side note, because I didn't really address it earlier because I was in shock, but the fact that Paula broke her fucking wrist on Sylvia's face just shows me like how badly this girl got it, because you hear, oh, she got bludgeoned, she got beat, and they're fancy words for saying she got like abused, right? Mm-hmm. And probably pretty accurate words, but when you think of like how hard the impact of each of those hits were, when you think that someone's wrist literally broke as a result of that, like, it kind of puts it really into perspective.
Just how bad
it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, some of the specifics of her injuries were several burns all over her body, extensive muscle and nerve damage. There was bruising in her vaginal cavity. It was actually almost swollen shut. It was so damaged. All of her fingernails had been bent and broken backwards. Most of the skin around Sylvia's face, breasts, her neck, her right knees, all had been peeled back or receded. On top of that, her skin in all those areas was pulled back. So it was raw.
Oh my God.
Sylvia's lips also were so damaged, they were shredded. And they're assuming that that mostly came from her biting her lips. And some of the cuts were actually caused by cutting.
So they cut her.
Yes. As well. Like, it was, I don't know, I didn't find any details saying how they did it, but that's what was in the autopsy report. So she had bitten them, I assume, in just so much pain and had torn up her lips, so they were also extensively damaged. On top of that, she was extremely emaciated at the time of death. Her ultimate cause of death by the coroner was noted as subdural hematoma because she had received a severe blow to the right temple. Secondary to this was prolonged damage to her skin plus severe malnutrition.
Wow.
So a solid combo of everything.
Yeah.
Caused her death, but dang hey.
Yeah, that is fucking insane. Mm-hmm. If she had not died of the temple, like the malnutrition or whatever would have been.
It was going to happen no matter which way you slice it, unless she had maybe gone to the hospital days before.
It makes me wonder what blow was the one that actually did her in.
You do wonder.
Like, was it the curtain rods? Was it the book that Gertrude hit her over the head with repeatedly? Like,
was it the feet?
Yeah, like, what was it?
Yeah. It's really hard to say, but either way, it sounds like it was inevitable. Now, Bev, when the police were called, it said that Sylvia was actually already in full rigor mortis. And as we've learned before in other cases,
she was dead a while.
Yeah. It's like about 8 hours because it goes in stages, right?
Of course.
So based on what Gertrude said, the police were a little confused with her time of death. To add another element to the confusion of Sylvia's time of death, the coroner noted that she had actually been bathed either close to death or after death in cooler water, and that could have sped up the loss of body temperature, therefore speeding up the rigor mortis timeframe. So they aren't 100% sure when she died that day. Now, with all this evidence calling Gertrude's story into question, her and her family become suspects and are all indicted on December 30th, 1965 in Marion County. The grand jury indicted Gertrude, Paula, John Jr., and Stephanie, as well as 2 boys from the neighborhood, Richard Hobbs and Coy Hubbard, with first-degree murder with premeditated malice.
Wow.
Big charges there, hey?
Yeah, for a lot of people.
6?
Yeah, 6. That's a lot of people being indicted for first-degree murder.
Well, exactly. That is a lot. On one person, too, like, whoa. Now, 3 weeks before the indictment, Stephanie had also, as we know, been held without bond, but was released from custody upon filing habeas corpus.
Oh, God. It's like I feel like I should know what habeas corpus is. What is it, Becky?
It's basically where that person and their lawyer can go up against a judge and file that. And without enough evidence, they are to be released. And it's their lawful right to do so.
So they're not allowed to be kind of held in detention
Without
grounds.
Yes, exactly. So she was actually released, which I think is...
It's actually kind of nice, right?
Yeah.
Because she's the only one who ever showed Sylvia compassion.
Exactly. And she knew her
offered the
mom
bath.
was... Right? She knew her mom was out of line.
Yeah,
She knew it was wrong. She's like the only one that
what was
recognized
she to
that.
do?
Nothing. She's so young.
Yeah, so, I mean,
Thank goodness.
if any one of her kids gets released on habeas corpus, it ought to be Stephanie.
It ought to be. It ought to be. So once she was granted habeas corpus, all first-degree murder charges were dropped, and she was ultimately given immunity from any other prosecution. However, under one condition, that she has to testify against her family.
Of course.
As well as all the other individuals in this case.
Yeah.
Now, Bev, in the pretrial, all accused individuals had been evaluated and were all mentally competent to stand trial, including Gertrude, which I actually did find kind of interesting, but she's just evil. She knows right from wrong.
Yeah.
So in the pretrial, prosecutors had let it be known that their intention was to seek the death penalty for all 5 defendants. So at that time, when they were trying to select the jury, anyone who was opposed to the death penalty were completely excluded from jury duty.
Right. Well, I mean, that makes sense. They're going to be inherently biased and probably would be that one person to stalemate, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah, they did this, but I don't believe in the death penalty, so, like...
Just life in prison.
Mm-hmm.
We say that like we totally agree with the death penalty, but we don't.
Yeah. Like, it's definitely
Just
not
to be
black or
clear.
white, but in this case, I'm just like, I wouldn't mind if Gertrude died.
Right. Max consequence for your action.
Yeah.
And then on April 18th, 1966, the trial began. Gertrude pled not guilty by reason of insanity,
Ugh.
where the other 4, Richard Hobbs, Coy Hubbard, Paula and John Baniszewski, said that they were all pressured and somewhat forced into participating in Sylvia's torment and abuse.
I mean, I don't completely doubt that.
I mean, Paula was 17, though. She's almost an adult.
You know, she had a lifetime under Gertrude's reign. You never know.
I bet she did not get a normal childhood, Bev.
Also witnessed abuse herself. Like, her mom's abuse, too.
Oh, yeah.
Just saying.
Now, all 5 defendants, Bev, were actually tried at the exact same time. So one trial.
One trial.
One trial.
Weird.
Now, probably the most heartbreaking part of the trial is when Jenny Likens testified. She testified against all 5 defendants at the exact same time, and she said that they had all physically and emotionally abused her sister over and over and over again. She also said that Sylvia had done nothing wrong to receive any of this abuse.
Amen.
She also stated that there was no truth to any of the rumors that she had been accused of spreading, as well as all the negative things that they said towards Sylvia's character were all false. Jenny told everyone that it only took 2 weeks for the abuse to happen. And not only did Sylvia get tortured and abused, but Jenny herself got beaten and made fun of, obviously to a much lesser extent as her sister. The abuse just continued to get progressively worse and worse and worse, and ultimately led to her sister's death. She mentioned to the courts that at one point, Her sister wasn't even able to produce any more tears because she was so dehydrated. So although she was suffering and going through so much, she couldn't even cry.
That is next level. I literally had no idea that your tears could be dehydrated from you. Yeah. I know I said that weird, but like,
I did have
seriously.
To think.
You could be so dehydrated you can't cry. I mean, it makes sense, but have you ever thought that like just at one point you'd be dehydrated enough to not cry?
No, never once.
I just thought like that you could always cry.
You always got tears.
Damn.
But no, sadly. Now, Bev, one of the other boys, Randy Lepper, who was initially arrested but released, he was actually able to corroborate some of Jenny's testimony. He said that he had also seen Sylvia crying, but there weren't any tears. He also said that he witnessed Stephanie strike Sylvia real hard after her mother had ordered her to remove her clothes in his presence. Now, he had also confessed to having beat Sylvia himself, and he said it happened anywhere from 10 to 40 separate times, which I actually think is a big window, and I think I'd be able to kind of say a bit more than that big window.
Yeah, 10 to 40.
But
huge.
Regardless, the fact that he's giving those numbers is outrageous.
Yeah, like the minimum is 10 times that he beat her.
And that's one boy. Now, in what I think is kind of shocking, but maybe some people won't, Gertrude had decided to take the stand in her own defense.
Okay. My God. I what the fuck?
I hate when criminals do this. I hate it so much.
The most guilty ones. We say this every fucking podcast.
And it's not like they're admitting to like what they've done. They minimize it or they completely deny their involvement or that they did anything.
I think it speaks to criminals' psychopathy when they truly think like or try and convince people like I'm innocent of this. Like, can you be more of a psychopath?
Seriously.
Like, right?
Well, Bev, I don't know what this has to do with her psychopathy, but she completely denied any involvement in this crime. Not even a shred of responsibility for Sylvia's long-term abuse and death.
Delusional.
Completely delusional. She said it must have been her children and the children in her neighborhood. So she's throwing her kids
under the fucking semi.
Yeah.
Like as we said earlier, she's just a
she's the worst.
She's the worst.
Terrible human. And listen how awkward this must be. Her children are in the courtroom with her. They're all being tried at the same time.
Yeah.
So they hear her say all this.
Deny.
Right?
And literally they're sitting there probably like, you were a huge part as to why this happened and why we did the things we did.
Like, this probably would have not happened without you, you jerk.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. If I was her kid,
how abandoned would you feel by your mom?
Yeah. I'd be like, I'm never seeing you in prison if I get off.
Yeah. And if I do, shanking you.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I'm sorry.
Well, good thing
you're dead to me. Yeah. You're dead to me, mother.
I hate you. I will never forgive you.
Yeah. But seriously.
No, seriously. So one of the questions that Gertrude was asked while on the stand was, did she ever beat Jenny? She only claimed that she would start to spank her on occasion, but was too frail and emotionally couldn't handle harming the child and had never hit her on any other occasion.
Okay, I do have to say, just a quick side note. I don't know what it was like in the 60s, but if I left my child at some random woman's house and she spanked my child, oh my God. Even that alone.
There'll be hell to pay from Bev, for
yeah,
sure.
Like, you don't want no one else spanking your child?
Right.
It's totally inappropriate. I mean, her dad did say use a firm hand, so maybe...
An iron fist, if you will.
Okay, well, maybe, but like, speaking for myself, if that, even that alone, let alone the abuse that actually took place in that household. I mean, just the spanking alone would be enough to make me just like...
Pop your top. Oh, hands down, Bev. Now, throughout the trial, a lot of people had testified and had been able to corroborate all the abuse, torture, and humiliation. What's sad is that within the last 2 months, multiple people had been made aware or heard that there was a girl in the Baniszewski household being abused. And most of the people didn't do much about it. What I find so offensive in this case is that Gertrude pleaded not guilty due to insanity, and her defense ultimately said that what person in their right mind could have committed these brutal acts?
Literally.
This was not acts of a sane person. So that's what her defense is saying.
Yeah, well,
We already know she's competent. She knows right from wrong.
yeah, and it's easy to just dismiss that statement altogether and be like, no, it's not someone who is like necessarily mentally in the wrong place. It's literally just someone who's evil. Like, if we were to actually use that as a defense, we couldn't fucking put anyone on trial for murder, you idiot. Like, anyone who does murders, like Jeffrey Dahmer, eating people, like, who in their right mind would do that?
That's right.
Like a psychopath.
Yeah.
A psychopath.
Yeah, you're
A
not
psychopath would.
crazy or
Yeah.
insane. You're just evil.
Yeah.
Now, about a month later, May 19th, 1966, the jury returned after 8 hours of deliberation. Gertrude, she was found guilty.
Guilty as charged.
That's right, guilty of first-degree murder and was recommended to life in prison. Paula was found guilty of second-degree murder, and the other 3 were found guilty of manslaughter. When the sentences were read, Gertrude and her children burst into tears. This is virtually the only appearance of remorse that any of them showed throughout this whole process.
Yeah, remorse for their life, their future life.
Well, exactly. I have to go to jail because I'm so terrible.
Yeah.
Now, Richard, Coy, and John Jr. all received sentences anywhere from 2 to 21 years. Now, in 1970, Gertrude and Paula both had their convictions reversed. And the reason why was because the original judge had denied multiple submissions that they changed the venue and all have separate trials. This was because of the extensive media coverage. They ultimately believed they weren't given a fair trial. And in 1971, they both were retried. This time, Paula pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter because she did not want to face another trial. So she was given the term same as the boys, 2 to 20 years.
Did she had life in prison?
Initially, yes.
Okay.
Now, once in jail, Paula had actually attempted to escape 2 times, but was unsuccessful. However, she was then released in December of 1972, which, might I add, is a complete crock of shit. That was hardly any time in
2
jail.
years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Gertrude, on the other hand, was, thank goodness, convicted of first-degree murder.
Again.
Yes, again.
Good.
And she was sentenced to life in prison. Gertrude was known as an exemplary prisoner, and she was able to work in the prison sewing shop and was seen as someone that was a mother figure to the other inmates. Her nickname was actually Mom.
Ugh, what a shame.
I know.
She should be stripped of that title, honestly.
It's like, do you know what she did? Then in 1985, Gertrude was able to apply for parole. And at that point, she had changed her name to Nadine Van Vossen and proclaimed that she was a devout Christian. When it came time for her parole, there was a huge uproar through Indiana. Jenny Likens, along with other family members, obviously protested her release. There was also an anti-crime group that came to help Jenny and her family. As a collective, they were actually able to raise 40,000 signatures from all the citizens of Indiana, and they all opposed Gertrude's release. They wanted her to stay in jail the rest of her life. During her parole hearing, she tells the board that she wishes that the death of Sylvia could be undone. However, she still minimized her responsibility for her actions, and she said, "I'm not sure what role I had in Sylvia's death because I was on drugs. I never really knew her. I take full responsibility for whatever happened to Sylvia."
Yeah, no, that's no. For whatever happened, you abused her.
You tortured her.
What the fuck?
I know, so she's taking
responsibility.
She's minimizing her responsibility.
Yeah, she knows she has to take responsibility, but her true colors are still showing.
100%. Now, because of Gertrude's outstanding record in prison, the parole board voted and ever so slightly granted her parole. She was released from prison on December 4th, 1985. Once she was released from prison, Gertrude still never accepted full responsibility for her role in Sylvia's death. I think that's something we can expect because she's the worst.
Yep.
Once released, she moved to Iowa and lived under the radar, but by June 16th, 1990, Gertrude had succumbed to lung cancer at the age of 61.
Well, I'm happy she fucking died so quickly after being released from prison, which is a goddamn shame, if I must say. The least that could happen is that she dies early, right?
Yeah. Karma's a bitch.
Karma's a bitch, Gertrude. You're the worst.
Now, in 1972, when Paula had been released, she went and assumed a new identity. Her name was Paula Pace. And because of that name change, she was actually able to get a job as a school counselor aide for 14 years. But in 2012, when the school board found out who she really was and her true identity, she was fired. And so she should be, without at least disclosing it.
Yeah, you need to disclose that because you're literally working with a vulnerable population, like minors.
Exactly.
Come on.
She should have never been allowed to get that job in the first place.
No doubt. I mean, well, I do, listen, if she had done the work, disclosed her past, and, showed how she had overcome, I don't know, her abusive of minor tendency, I mean, yeah, maybe, I believe people can redeem themselves, but at the same time, you didn't disclose something that's, super important. Of course you're going to get fucking fired.
Exactly. I would fire anyone who lied about that. I don't care if you did a good job, you're fired. I'm sorry. You can't keep your job. You lied.
Yeah.
About something major because I probably never would have hired you in the first place, to be honest.
Fair.
Go get a job working with anyone but children. That's how I see it. Just saying. Now, Richard Hobbs, Coy Hubbard, and John Jr. only served less than 2 years in the Indiana Reformatory, and then they were given parole in February 27th, 1968. In 2010, the Boone County Child Advocacy Center was founded. But as of 2016, it was renamed to the Sylvia Child's Advocacy Center in honor of Sylvia Likens. This center was made for the purpose to assist child victims of abuse and neglect and to reduce the ongoing traumatic effects experienced as a result of their ordeals, as well as to prevent child abuse in Boone and Montgomery counties. And in 2001, a 6-foot-tall granite memorial was made and then dedicated to Sylvia in Indianapolis. This memorial was attended by several hundreds of people, and the memorial was inscribed with the words, "Of a young child who died a tragic death." And as a result of this memorial, the laws actually changed and the awareness increased for these
child
children.
Abuse.
Yeah.
Wow.
This was a commitment to our children that the Indianapolis Police Department is working to make this a safe city for all their children. And because of Sylvia's death and this memorial, it also pushed forward Indiana's mandated reporter law, which is so important because there were so many people that should have done more or come forward for Sylvia. And ultimately, there was no mandate at the time for it, so it was a little easier to not get involved and turn a blind eye.
Yeah, totally. Like the neighbors, like the nurse, like the gentleman who reported to the school that this was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like the neighborhood kids. Like so many people that had the chance to do something about what they saw.
Exactly. And albeit not all of them are mandated reporters.
Oh, well, but
there was a few in there.
But, even to a certain extent, we all are. If
That's
you
true.
see child abuse happening,
say something.
Do something. Say something. Do something. Don't let the children suffer.
Don't let the children suffer. So, as we know, I don't know as we know, but I always watch Dr. Phil, and he's a mandated reporter, and he says, if you don't change, I am a mandated reporter, and I have the right and responsibility to report this. So either you fix it or change, do something about it.
Amen. 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 No, seriously, I will say, Dr. Phil, shout out to you because you are the reason I went and got a degree in the behavioral sciences and the reason I work with the vulnerable population today.
Amen. True. That is an amen right there. All right, Bev. This was a really sad case. Really terrible. Kind of hard to listen to at times.
Yeah.
But that's all I have today. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for sharing.